never rests.
Counting careless in the sky. What a thrilling time to be alive.
It's hump day. It's Wednesday. It's the Georgia Show. I'm Jake. He's Jake. I'm Ro. He's Bruce. We're DawgsHQ. And big news dropping last night. The kind of news I always love in the evenings, right before the Braves come on.
Jake Roos has defeated his stomach virus.
And Jake Roos is alive against all odds. We're going to dig into that and get him to give us a play-by-play on everything that he went through as his entrails tried to exit him over a few days, over the course of a few days. But a big news also came down last night, too, secondary to Roos's gastrointestinal problems. Isaiah Gibson decommits from USC. Who saw that coming? Oh, my God. Who saw that coming? I can't believe we clickbaited everybody and told them that we thought that was going to happen. I'm just giving my man Scott Schrader a little bit of a hard time. It's okay. But Isaiah Gibson does decommit from USC. He's back on the market. We're going to talk about Georgia's chances. We're going to talk about how that recruitment is kind of shaping up there a little bit. And also, we've been doing a position week thing, and we haven't really gotten to it on the show. We've gone through quarterbacks, tight ends, and running backs, but hell, I mean, we never do things with appropriate timing hardly anyway. So we're just going to jump right into the middle of that thing, and I'm working on the wide receivers right now, and I figured today would be a good time to talk about Georgia's wide receivers because there's a lot to talk about when you really dig into that situation and what the Bulldogs have going on there. But, Roos, the big news, Isaiah Gibson's back in play. Just initially, as a man who is known as the Obi-Wan Kenobi of recruiting over at DawgsHQ, and I'm not even a Star Wars fan, what say you about this and kind of what it means for Georgia?
Not surprising is what I say about it. I mean, that's really the big takeaway. It was way more surprising that Isaiah Gibson was ever committed to Southern Cal. Going back into this recruitment, that was just not a school that you heard that he mentioned. And so it was one of those situations. He goes out, takes a visit, and then kind of right after that visit, it was, I believe, like the day after Justice Terry committed, if I'm not mistaken, to Southern Cal. He goes ahead and pops, and then subsequently, just doesn't return, doesn't set an OV, kind of seems like he's refusing to set an OV to in some cases, has all these other trips planned and doesn't go forward with it. So it just wasn't that surprising to me. It was more of a matter of when, not if. And he's a tremendous player, and USC, I'm sure it stings to lose him, but they cannot be too surprised out in Los Angeles that they dropped this one. I don't think that anybody ever truly expected Isaiah Gibson to get out of the Southeast. And I've had my pick in for Georgia since February or March. I don't have any plans on changing that anytime soon. Not to say the Dogs are a slam dunk there. I think he's going to take a step back a little bit. But, I think that, him getting out of the Southeast at this point would be a surprise. He's in Ohio State, I believe, today or was yesterday. May still be finishing up that trip today. Oklahoma, I know, is on the agenda as well. The Sooners were one of those schools that you did hear some buzz about back in February.
Can I stop you right here? Yeah. I believe we have breaking news. You are a magnet for this stuff on this show. Justice Terry has also decommitted.
No, you're kidding me.
Yeah.
Oh my God. All right. Well, I'm glad we have other people who work at our site who can write that story, is what I would say about that.
Yeah, we are on the live show right now on YouTube. We appreciate everybody that is joining in. And Justice Terry is also back on the market. So who saw that coming? Who could?
Well, just copy and paste, man. I mean, Justice Terry was set to go to his official visit at USC this weekend, actually. So I guess he decided he didn't want to make the trip out to Los Angeles. Look, if you're a Georgia fan, that's as good as it gets right there, man. I mean, you're back in the hunt, and they're coming to the dance without a girl. So all the better for you. Huge news there. I can't believe that just took place. But
I mean, I think this is true. I'm okay. I mean, unless some of us, yeah, there we go. There we go.
You confirm?
Yeah, it is. It is official. On 3 recruits is reporting Justice Terry has decommitted from USC. If you have a friend and you know that they are members over at our USC site, check on them. You might want to go check on them a little bit and just see how they're doing. But I mean, obviously not. I was really not trying to have fun with those guys. It's tough times over at DawgsHQ when there's a big decommitment. Hell, Roos, it was tough times over at DawgsHQ when these 2 committed to USC.
It was. It absolutely was. And rightfully so, man. I mean, look, Terry flipped his commitment, which, felt bad. He was, I think at that point, Georgia's longest or second
Hashtag
longest.
Feels bad, man.
Yeah, I know a thing or two about it. He was the second longest tenured commit, I think, at that point, or one of the longest tenured. So he'd been on the list forever. He flips, and then Gibson, who you felt like was trending your way, he flips, or it doesn't flip. I mean, he just straight up commits. So yeah, that's insane news.
But it was one of those things with Gibson that you felt so good about Georgia's chances that it really did kind of feel like a flip. Like it felt like you were almost kind of counting an egg before it hatched here, a chicken before that hatched, that Gibson was going to end up in Georgia's class. I mean, hell, we went through that. We kind of have a day over it on 3 where we look at kind of our notes and they're like, hey, what we want to do kind of site-wide is if you've been thinking about putting in an RPM and you feel good about it, we want you to go ahead and put one in today. We want to go ahead and kind of make it a day for the fans and for our readers and kind of get this thing jazzed up. And I think both of us, not long before that, not too soon before that happened, were like, Isaiah Gibson.
Yeah.
We were picking him to end up in Georgia's class. And then all of a sudden we get an ostrich-sized egg yolk on our face with them flipping USC. But the whole time, I think from the jump, we were kind of like, all right, let's see how this is going.
Yeah, I just don't know that anybody ever felt very confident about either of these guys landing there. I know, well, I shouldn't say no one. I think that some of the SC people did, that largely that might be the case. But I do think, I mean, and that's what you got to go with, right? I mean, if they're on your commit list, you and I talked about it, last year? It was, or I'm sorry, not last year, recently, of the idea of like last year's class, what was it, like 80% of them or something, right? Didn't flip or didn't decommit or had been on the commit list solidly. So the odds typically are pretty good. And I think that, you've got to hope that you win those battles if you're a school like SC or you're anybody, right? I mean, you have to hope that you can hold on to a guy from that far away, from a footprint like Georgia's. So it's tough, man. It is. And in the era of NIL and in the era of, what do kids want and how do you get that to them? Look, everybody to some degree is at risk. And that's just the only real way to put it.
Absolutely. I want to get to Jason Cancel's comment here. So is Gibson going to Ohio State since that was his last visit before decommitting? He's at Ohio State right now. Now, one of the things you would know right now if you were over at DawgsHQ is our man Rusty Mansell reported last night. This decommitment was something that's been in the work for weeks, all the way back there. The word was back at the On 3 Elite Series. What was that? Was that that started the Tuesday after Labor Day, I believe.
It was like May 28th or something.
Yeah, somewhere in that little area. Maybe it was a little bit further after Labor Day. But the word there was that Gibson had already or was in the process or on the cusp of, let's use as many, kind of prepositional phrases as we can use here, of decommitting from USC. So that was kind of in the works there. Listen, I never count Ohio State out. Ohio State is a preeminent program in college football. They do a fantastic job of recruiting. But right now, I would say the SEC is going to be tough to beat for Isaiah Gibson. You got Auburn's in the mix, Tennessee's in the mix. I believe Georgia's got at least a nose, if not a head, maybe a shoulder out front right now.
Sure.
And then Oklahoma's going to get a chance to visit him. And Roos, didn't you say that there was some buzz at some point with Oklahoma?
Yeah, I mean, like when we talked to him in February at the Under Armour camp in Carrollton, that was a school that he talked about a lot. I mean, he mentioned them as a school that, definitely was going to get an OV, definitely had created a good relationship with him. So I don't think he's going to go to Oklahoma, just so we're all clear about that. I mean, I guess at this point, nothing should surprise me, but that doesn't seem like it's probably going to be the landing spot. I think it'll be Georgia, Tennessee, Auburn. I think he's going to probably stick within, a couple hours radius of Warner Robins, but that was a team that got mentioned. He's not going to get outside the SEC. That would be my bold prediction today, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, and as you can see right there,
work on the banner there.
you had to throw a little banner in there as well. Of Justice Terry. Even though I have also messed it up, I put a weird punctuation in there. We got a guy we work with who will throw in a weird punctuation every now and then too. Love him so much. But here we're just trying to produce a show and have a good time at the same time. We miss Bark After Dark. Let's put it. Jesus Christ, I am on the struggle bus right now. We're gonna scrap this.
It's all happening.
It's all happening. But so let's get to this Justice Terry thing, Roos. Yeah. Let me ask you this. I think right now we would both say that if someone gave us an amount of money, let's say $100, and we had to place it on Georgia or the field for either guy, we would put it on Georgia.
Yeah.
Which one do you feel that Georgia is in the best shape of landing?
Georgia. I feel like it's Terry.
Yeah,
I do for sure. Just because he's been so clear and so adamant, I think, throughout his recruitment about the idea that, even once he flipped, right? He said, "Oh yeah, I'm committed to USC, but Georgia's still number 2. Georgia's still right there. I've still got all this love for Georgia." So even during that time when he had the opportunity to say, "Look, I'm not even considering anybody else. I'm not thinking about anybody else," there was still that talk when it came to the Bulldogs. And so I think that that's impactful. I think that does mean something. And I think that, he's been to Georgia a ton of times. The familiarity is there.
He was back in Athens right after committing to USC, right? Like he was back in Athens
about a week and a half, I think. He came back for G-Day. And then he was back for, I don't think he came to the scavenger hunt, although he might have. But like 2 weeks after that, he came for his official visit, which was the first weekend of official visits. Regardless to say, Justice Terry has been to Athens a ton of times, so many times. I have no qualms in sticking my neck out there. I think he's going to Georgia. I thought he was going to go to Georgia all along. I thought he was going to go to Georgia even once he flipped his commitment. So it just is what it is. It makes it easier now. I think that you'll see, Georgia go all out for these guys. They're going to have to, because now everybody feels like the door is back open to them. But I feel very good about Terry being in this class personally.
And I will say this too, since we're kind of dealing with this, promo code use UGA1 and get 2 months off 2 months for $1. This is kind of initial reaction on our part, right? This is like quick reaction. We hadn't really had a chance to dig into these things, but this is kind of, hey, what did we know coming into this, and what are we saying right now? And that is that, listen, I think Georgia's going to probably get both of these guys. And I'm 100% wholeheartedly in agreement with Roos about Justice Terry. I believe that Justice Terry is probably the most likely of the two to be there. But I think Georgia's sitting at better than 50% right now for both of them, just off the cuff, just off the top of my head. And, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for Georgia to kind of, if Georgia could find some way to enter the football season with these two guys committed, let me tell you where that comes into play in such a big way. Ultimately, you get these guys on campus, and not on campus, but you get these guys into their football seasons where they're playing on Friday nights and they're trying to help their teams. Justice Terry plays for a pretty good team there in Manchester. Isaiah Gibson plays for a pretty good team there in Warner Robins. You get them kind of focused on their seasons. guys, there's no choice but for recruiting to get pushed to the back burner. Oh, and by the way, one of the easiest places for these guys to get to is Athens. The only other team that has, that's easier to get to, easier for either one of these guys to get to is Isaiah Gibson, as far as contenders go, is getting to Auburn. So that's, it's just one of those things you kind of look at.
That's pretty, yeah, for sure. I mean, and Knoxville's not totally insane either, I guess, for him. That's a doable drive in a night. But yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, this is an opportunity. Now, look, if I'm Clemson, if I'm Alabama, if I'm Florida, you better believe that the phone is ringing off the hook with my coaches calling and saying, hey, we need to get you down here. We need to get you in. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think those guys are going to end up there, but I'm just saying those people within inside that small radius are going to go for this and shoot their shot again.
Yeah, I'm asking Justice Terry right now. I'm like, hey, have you ever owned a really nice golf cart? We got one.
Sure. But I mean, I think the other consideration that you got to think about here is the idea that so many of these guys, and it wasn't always the case, right? It used to be the case that we would go into this season and there would be so many guys that would be open, decommit, or, open and still figuring things out. And they might commit at halftime during a game, or they might commit closer to signing day. In a lot of these cases, coaches want kids to have this done by the start of the season, not only to focus on their season, but to focus on the team, to not have to worry about the distractions, to not have guys like us coming and crawling around the football game on Friday night and having to pull
hiding in the bushes, maybe.
Exactly. Sure. So there's a number of, it's really taken a shift where I feel like that's kind of become the MO of a lot of high school players is I need to get this done prior to senior year. I'm not saying these guys will. I'm not saying that we're looking at like imminent commitments here in the next, month and a half. But would it surprise me? No.
I like this question here from our man, John Adams. Sir, we appreciate you and what you did as president of the United States. What impact to recruiting would this year's home schedule do for us compared to next year's home schedule? I mean, listen, man. I mean, next year's home schedule, Georgia is going to. I mean, when you got Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas at home, Georgia's going to have some nights in Athens where, listen, I'll put it this way: the Ole Miss game last year, I could barely move around on the sideline. And that they had so many recruits kind of through they put them on a different side of the field than us. And I went down to the sideline. It's the only game I went to the sideline for this year. And I went down to see our man, Eric Richards from FBU. Ran into AJ Mentor, Braves pitcher down there as well. But, man, you can hardly move around down there on some of those big recruiting weekends. There's so many kids down there and it gets so condensed. And it used to be even worse when they let the recruits go everywhere and they let us go everywhere because it was just packed down there. Georgia's going to have some of those days next football season, and they'll probably have them this year too. It's not like Georgia's not going to make the most of Tennessee and Auburn.
That's what I was getting ready to say is you've got Auburn and you've got Tennessee at home this year. So they're really, I mean, they've done a good job, even if they haven't necessarily had, like huge games. Like this Tennessee game is probably not going to be what 2-year Tennessee game was, right? It's not going to be, bring them into Stanford and #1 team and, yada, yada, yada. It's probably not going to have that kind of hype around it. It's still going to be an important game though. And Georgia is in contention with Tennessee for guys like Isaiah Gibson, guys like David Sanders. So, they're going to make sure that they maximize those opportunities. Yeah, next year's a lot more exciting. I mean, it's more opportunities, but, Georgia hasn't really suffered on that front. They managed to make even games that might not seem like huge events. For example, like this year's Mississippi State game, probably not the most exciting game, but I bet they make a pretty good recruiting weekend out of it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. And listen, it's one of those things too. I want to say this to Georgia fans. And I need to get this comment back up so that there's some context here for those of you who are watching. I've heard this same song and dance for 2 or 3 years now. Oh, man, the home schedule sucks. It's terrible. They have played a marquee, very fun, in a very big recruiting game, at least one each of those years, even when you go into the season thinking that there wouldn't be one. 2021, they ended up with a top 10 matchup against Arkansas at home, and that was a pretty good recruiting weekend. It was definitely a great weekend for the crowd. I'm trying to think if there was another game that year. Tennessee wouldn't have been at home. I'm trying to think if there was another game that year, and I seem to remember there being one. But 2022 was that Tennessee game. Still by far the most electric night I've ever experienced in Athens with the rain. And I mean, you want to talk about knowing for a fact Tennessee was in trouble, there just early in the game. I think it was Georgia's first third down stop after Dejon Edwards fumbled and Georgia forced the field goal. I was like, man, Tennessee's probably going to be in some trouble today. And they definitely were. I don't think Tennessee fans will ever realize how much the rain was a big factor in helping them stay close in that game rather than getting run out of the building. And then last year, Ole Miss, Missouri, South Carolina were all really cool games for Georgia to host recruits.
Yeah, I mean, South Carolina, nobody had any real feelings that South Carolina was going to give Georgia any trouble last year. I mean, it wasn't a situation.
And they did.
Well, sure, but I mean, nobody went in going thinking that, it didn't seem like it should be a big game for recruiting. But they maximize their opportunities. They've made a living off of doing that. And, that's what Kirby Smart and company do, man. And they're not going to, they're going to maximize this home schedule just as well. They'll be able to give some tickets out, I'm sure, for that Georgia Clemson game. I don't know who gets tickets. I don't know who's in charge of cocktail party this year. Who knows at this point?
I don't know.
But, they'll make the most of it. And listen, even that Georgia Clemson game to start the year, while that may not be an opportunity to show them your facilities and have them around, I remember speaking to guys after the Georgia-Oregon game, and they said they were just blown away by the amount of Georgia fans that were in that stadium at Mercedes and around the stadium. And just, even an atmosphere like that can impact a guy. So don't write off an opportunity like that. I know it's not on campus and they don't get the full experience, but it can really plant some important seeds as well.
No doubt about it. And when it comes to the cocktail party, the only thing I do is control what I can control, and that is to be the travel agent and food tourist that I am and eat at the same 3 places every time and enjoy them all. All right, let's jump to what everybody really wants to talk about, and that's what I wrote. Not really. If you decide to become a member over at DawgsHQ, you see it right there at the bottom of the screen. UGA1 is the promo code. Get 2 months for $1. If I have any advice for you, it's to read my stuff last all the time. It's the worst on the site. There's no doubt about it, but I try hard, and that's what matters. I make up for lack of talent with enthusiasm. But listen, I've been going through a position week series here recently. Did quarterbacks, and basically it's anywhere between 4 and 5 stories a week. What we're doing is we're digging into the depth chart, like an in-depth, just looking at one position at the time on the depth chart. Then we go into 3 questions for that group. If the group is big enough, we go into 3 players to watch for that group. We go to 3 bold predictions for that group, and then we look at the future and who Georgia is recruiting. This week, we're talking about receivers, Jake, and I'll be honest with you, dude, like the more I look at Georgia's receiving group, the more I feel like I remember Kirby Smart sitting down after the SEC championship game in 2019, after the Joe Burrow show, hosted by Joe Burrow. And him catching his own pass for a 9-yard gain and running around and making first-round defensive linemen look like children, but throwing to legit wideouts, and Georgia not really having their weapons. George Pickens was suspended for the first half. Dominic Blaylock got hurt in that game. And I remember Kirby saying, we're not where we need to be at wide receiver, and that's on me. And you saw Georgia kind of slowly get there, right? You saw Georgia they had a really good class in that 2020 class with Arian Smith and Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint, and Jermaine Burton. And despite the fact that they have lost guys, right? Like they've lost Jermaine Burton and they lost A.D. Mitchell, and they got Lab McConkey and they got A.D. Mitchell to begin with, and they were able to get Dylan Bell. And you've seen Georgia kind of build to this either via the transfer portal, but getting Ra Thomas and Dominic Lovett and the 3 guys they added this past year. And I feel like it has kind of all kind of come to a head a little bit here. Like they've kind of pushed all the dirt into the middle, and now there's a foundation at receiver for this coming season for Carson Beck. I can't remember Georgia ever having such a wide array of really talented football players at the receiver position.
Yeah, and not to just totally derail what you're saying here, but from a recruiting standpoint, which is, what I do, obviously, I think that you're seeing a trickle down now. I think that you're starting to see that kind of come to fruition. You got Thomas Blackshear and Talon Taylor already on the commit list for 2025. CJ Wiley still hanging out there. A lot of buzz around him. Travis Smith, a guy who's hanging out there with a lot of buzz around him. Jarrell Boulder, another guy. Tyler Williams, not that Tyler Williams, the young Tyler Williams, announcing that he's going to commit basically right after this Georgia OV. Georgia has kind of wandered in the desert when it came to wideouts. I think that that's probably a fair way to say it. It's before George Pickens, post AJ Green, and before George Pickens, there just wasn't a lot to write home about. And that was Georgia could sell development at linebacker. They could sell development at defensive line. They could sell it at offensive line easily. But wide receiver is a different beast, man. That's a different person. That's a different kind of player. That's a different mentality to play it. And so I'm not totally surprised that it took kind of getting a Pickens and getting a McConkey under your belt before you started to see that shift. But when you're talking about this year's team, I agree with you, man. A lot of different guys, a lot of weapons, a lot of guys who can do a lot of different things. I mean, a Swiss Army knife like Dylan Bell, gosh, I feel like it's been a minute since they even had one of those, right? I mean, a guy with the sort of versatility that he brings in the frame that he does it. Now Isaiah McKenzie or a Mecole Hardman, those were kind of gadgety guys that you could have do a lot of things for you. But Dylan Bell is doing that, I think, in a lot more NFL ready frame than either of those guys.
Yeah, the number of there's a lot of circles in a very large Venn diagram here, and there's a lot of intersection that goes on. You look at size, and Georgia has size amongst multiple guys, and they have different types of size. They got tall guys and long guys, but they've also got kind of more compact and physical guys, like you're talking about, like Dylan Bell, London Humphreys, Colby Young. You look at speed, Arian Smith, Anthony Evans, Dylan Bell fits into that category as well. Michael Jackson's a fast guy. London Humphrey's a speedster. You've got that going on. And listen, we're talking about all of this despite the fact that Georgia lost guys like CJ Smith, who appeared as if, he was going to be a good player at Georgia, but was kind of ready to go somewhere where he could play and play a ton. But Dominic Lovett, crafty route runners, Ra Thomas, a guy that kind of checks off all the boxes, and a guy that I'm telling you right now, man, if you talk to the people inside of Georgia's football program, like if you were to get access and you were to go man to man, and I haven't done this, but I've been told this by people that are in that building, is like most people would agree that Ra has as much or more Sunday potential as anybody in that group. You're talking about a 6'1 plus 200-pound wideout who runs really well, who runs great routes. As long as he picks up that offense and kind of gets where he wants to go. And he had a long way to go coming from an air raid attack that was super, super simple and didn't ask a lot of its receivers from a mental standpoint. I'm just kind of blown away at kind of how, the knock on the group may be a strength of the group, and it's the fact that they don't have an alpha male, but I do think that they have 4 or 5 guys capable of being a number one receiver. Listen, we're talking about they got 2 guys on the roster, at least 2 guys on the roster that have shown that they can be the number one receiver for an SEC team. Thomas and Lovett have done it. Yeah. So, I mean, and let's not act like these guys can't put up numbers.
I feel like people really forget that.
Yeah.
I feel like people forget that those guys even played for another team, let alone that they were the leading receivers for those teams at the time. And mind you, good teams, like good passing attacks at those times.
Good, solid football teams. Yeah, I mean, neither one of them were playing for New Year's Six bowls in the years that they played for them.
Right.
But they were very, very good.
Yeah, I mean, it was a shock when Dominic Lovett left. I think Missouri.
Yeah.
That was a team, especially
Missouri damn near beat Georgia.
Right. That was a team that was trending up. I mean, so yeah, I think that they've done a really nice job of stocking that room. I think that, one of the things that has, I think, been tough for Georgia there is the continuity within coaching. And you've seen a lot of turnover there in terms of that. And so I think it made sense for them with a group like this that they felt solid about, that, has some experienced guys in it, that quite frankly will lose some experienced guys in this offseason, that they went out and got a guy that they knew they could trust, that they knew could get the job done in James Coley. And that gave them a bit of consistency from a staff standpoint. And as far as knowing that they had a guy that would do it the way that they wanted it done. And I think that's also paying dividends for you on the trail as well.
Absolutely. Well, we have 2 more stories coming in that series for the wideouts this week. We've also covered quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends. We'll be getting into offensive line, both interior and offensive tackle next week. Then the defense starts. We're going to wrap it all up before the season starts. Last weekend of official visits coming up this weekend, Roos. We'll be recapping that for you guys on Sunday and kind of what's going on there. Listen, we gotta get this June stuff out of the way. It looks like June, like Rusty says, June visits turn into July commitments, and looks like I really think this Georgia class. I would have told you probably 2 or 3 weeks ago that, or maybe a month ago, a little further back, that I knew Georgia was going to have a top 5 class, and I felt like it could very possibly have a top 3 class. I didn't know about number 1. I think Georgia's got a really good shot at the nation's number 1 class this year, and that was just because I wasn't counting my chickens before they hatched with Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson. But I'm telling you right now, Georgia gets Gibson, they get Terry, they get Elijah Griffin. They do some of the things that they're looking to do on the offensive side of the ball and get some of those guys. Looking at another banner class for Georgia, another difference maker.
You hate to use that dream class thing, but that would feel like a dream class up front.
Yeah, it would. And honestly, it would be on paper one of the best defensive front. I mean, and you're still talking about other guys out there like Julius Holly, Bryce Davis. I keep wanting to say Bryce Walker for some reason. There's so many Walkers in the Georgia program. Looking on the offensive line, those interior guys, Cortez Smith and Dontrell Glover in play, Juan Gaston, Nick Brooks, just massive human beings on the offensive line. Receiver CJ Wiley. I think a guy, and one thing we've just glossed right over, Roos, in this whole wide receiver thing, and it's something we'll get to later this week. How much talk has there been out of all the hand wringing, right? How much talk has there been of Georgia landing what is objectively one of the best wide receivers in the 2024 class already? And that's Talon Taylor, the top 10 wide receiver in the country, out of Geneva, Illinois, number 50 overall prospect in the entire country. A guy that may be able to challenge for 5-star status at some point, especially with what he did at the big 7-on-7 that he was at here recently. Georgia lands an elite wideout in this class, and there's almost no talk about it. Get off your get off your cans, fellas. Discuss this stuff.
A top 50 player in the country from Illinois that you beat out Notre Dame and Ohio State for.
Yeah.
Come on now.
All right.
If that's not been happening a lot. That is not a commonplace thing. And so for Georgia to go pull that off, that says a lot. And it says, like I said, to me, this says something about the idea of like where Georgia is and how it's being viewed right now when it comes to that position. A lot of these guys who are committing, by the way, not only are they kind of buying into what Georgia has done production-wise, they're buying into Georgia as a whole program because they just started this relationship with James Coley, February? That was?
January or February? Yeah, I think it was February because BMAC was a late departure.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So, it's for these guys, and you heard this consistently in talking to the people around Talon Taylor, was look, Georgia is like almost a factory at this point. It's about coming in there, being a part of this thing. And, yes, the coach is important. And yes, who is coaching me at the next level is important. But I trust the people at Georgia because of what Georgia's put on paper. And like I said, you're seeing that trickle down effect in recruiting that's coming from the continuity that they've created at wide receiver and the talent they've had there, frankly.
No doubt about it. And listen, we're going to have you covered on this. We're going to have you covered on everything.
I think we already do, if I'm not mistaken. Get over. We got some.
We've already got really good content up around this for sure. Yeah. And it's not going to stop. Listen, June, this coming weekend, the dead period begins at midnight on Sunday, midnight on Monday, depending on how you look at it. But the news isn't going to stop. Everything's going to keep rolling through July. Next thing you know, it's going to be start of preseason camp, and nobody covers the recruiting better than we do. Nobody recovers the team better than we do. And we're excited, man. We're excited about what's going over at DawgsHQ. Use promo code UGA1 and get 2 months for $1, 50 cents a month. Guys, you can't even get anything out of a vending machine for what you can get from us for 2 months. That's just how it works. But for this episode of The Georgia Show, I'm Jake. He's Jake. Bark After Dark's coming back to you in July. For those of you that don't know about it, come check us out. We'd love to have you. Y'all take it easy.